I think that's fantastic. I think that's fantastic. And I think, New Year's are always interesting because it's a chance, it's more than any other time in the world, more than like Mondays or quarters. It's a true new beginning. I mean, a true new year of possibility. And how we approach that is everything. So going into it with a strong mindset and a commitment and intention is just so powerful, Donna. And I hope all of us are doing that. It'll make a big difference in our businesses, and sometimes I give myself the grace to start things on the day after New Year's, because that still feels like a holiday for me. So, and it is, it still is a holiday, but it still feels like a day that I don't start resolutions or anything like that. So speaking of resolutions, has anybody made any? Smart group.
Yeah, I don't make resolutions.
Here. That's awesome. Oh, that's crazy. Well, so you came this morning to hear about negotiation, and I'd love to hear some of what you're discovering in your dealings with negotiation. What are some of the things that you're discovering? I love interaction, and I think you learn best when you think and participate. Anybody using escalation clauses?
Yes, I actually did on my deal that I have right now that's closing next Tuesday. I did include an escalation clause. And the funny thing is they had multiple offers, but I guess the way that I worded the escalation clause, it had to do with the net. So they didn't even use the escalation clause, and they still accepted our offer. But they supposedly had higher offers, but I guess because they were asking for closing costs and whatnot, that they didn't have to use the escalation clause, and we were still the best offer.
That's absolutely excellent. It's really difficult to negotiate in the blind, and most agents won't tell you what the other offers are, for ethical reasons. So it's very difficult the only thing you can do is absolutely just call the agent and say, can you tell me a little bit about what's important to your sellers, and then try and do your best to put that in the offer. But I applaud you, because it might be that just that escalation clause being in there showed them your intent over some of the, and sometimes it's not just about the money, sometimes it's about the terms, and as you all know. So good job on that, Donna.
Hey, thank you. What I would like a little advice on, though, is I have another client. We put in an offer and we were not selected. It was, excuse me, FHA, and we had offered over list price. That's all that my folks could do was $5,000 over. They were coming out of pocket with that. We were not selected. I'm sorry, I'm battling a little bit of a cold. And I tried to get feedback from the agent and was not successful, and I found that frustrating. I personally like to share with other agents, kind of give them an idea of why an offer was selected over theirs. Mm-hmm. And I just, I found it frustrating that this agent wouldn't share anything.
Yeah, so there are agents out there like that. They're just, once they get the deal done, they're focused on the deal, and everybody else is, it's just the weirdest thing to me, because we live in a very small real estate world, and that person, like, you might be on the other end of a deal where they want to submit an offer, and you're going to remember that. And so the rule of thumb for all of us is just treat everybody the way you want to be treated. One of the things that came to mind when you said that, and I don't know that it would be any more successful, because it's still a little bit like homework, but to create a 5-question survey and just say, This is for so we can, so I can help my buyers. I'm sure you understand in this market how important it is. So was it the price? Yes or no? Was it terms? Yes or no? Was it that it wasn't a cash offer? Yes or no? Just the 5 questions that you can think of that would simplify, that would give you some real data. And say here, text it to them, and they can just say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, something like that. That's my only idea around that. But there are going to be agents who just don't respond. There's nothing you can really do about that.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
You're welcome. So when we talk about negotiation, it's really important to assess the type of negotiation and identify value creating moves. So there's a book called Deal Making, The New Strategy of Negotiations by Guhan Subramanian, and I will post that in the PC help. But you want to identify what type of negotiation. Are you negotiating the best deal? Are you negotiating a win-win situation, ideally? And then you have to identify what value creating moves you can have that are not that hard for you to give, but that might be valuable for the other person. Kind of think about this. Everybody's junk, my junk is somebody else's treasure. So what we think isn't valuable might be valuable to somebody. So here's an example. The house is on the market for $600,000, but you know that it's overpriced. So your estimate's more like $500,000. And when you offer that, the seller says, not even close, doesn't counter. So you think the seller is in denial about the housing market, but sellers are looking at prices paid for neighbors' houses a few years ago. And right now, buyers are looking at comparable transactions from the past few months, so to try and determine the fair price. So you might consider a creative deal structuring to break through and start by noting that a typical house purchase is a very tight deal. Once the seller commits to a particular buyer, they really can't sell the house to anybody else. I don't know if you know this, but once a seller signs a purchase and sale contract, they can say no to everything else. But if they do not go forward with the sale of the house, they can't change their mind, or they can be sued for performance. They have very few rights in the state of Georgia. So if you make it, maybe you say, maybe if you say, hey, if you'll take our offer for $500,000, we'll give you 30 days to negotiate another deal. Something like that. You have to make it legal, or we'll give you 30 days to keep your house on the market if you agree to accept our offer at the end of 30 days. You have to get creative sometimes with things, but for them, that might mean, I've got, and this is one of the reasons why I know a lot of agents don't like the easy exit listing plan, but I think it gives people choices. I've never, knock on wood, had anybody use it, but it gives people choices. And I think people like to feel like they're not stuck in a box or backed into a corner, I should say. This is from Barbara Corcoran. She says, take your fiduciary duty seriously. If you genuinely want to live up to your fiduciary duty to your client, you need to make every possible effort to get them a better price, even if you're just doing it to save face. She says, negotiation is like dating. There's got to be some romance. If the guy gets the girl home on the first date, it's too easy and the relationship doesn't last. She says, nothing poisons a deal faster than when the asking price is immediately accepted or the buyer's first bid is accepted. Either the seller feels he underpriced his home, or else the buyer feels he offered too much money for it. So rather than work on the relationship a bit, the buyer and seller tend to drift apart. I get what she's saying. I think in our world right now, I think that's probably older advice, and it might come around again. So it's important to note. But in our world, I think people are tired, and I think they just want to get it settled. So I think sometimes just going in there with your best and getting it accepted is probably the best thing. Anybody have any comments about that or any thoughts about that?
Well, as far as my the contract that I have that's closing, where we included the escalation clause, my buyers kind of questioned, did we, why didn't they use the escalation clause? Were there really other higher offers? Did we offer much out of the box? So that question came up for my buyer when the seller accepted our offer and didn't use the escalation clause. they question that. So that made me think of that when you said that.
Interesting. So it's still happening then today, and just in different ways. So yeah, it's you know, she's got a good point. And so the way I look at what we're going over this morning is these are tools for your toolbox. There's no one right way, no one wrong way. Negotiation. Oh, and I wanted to give you this first. The definition of negotiation. I love this. It's you know, we think of negotiation sometimes as a battle and a win, but negotiation is a dialogue between two or more people or parties intending to reach a beneficial outcome over one or more issues where a conflict exists with respect to one of these issues. It also means a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement. It's so that's where we're going with this. There's some other definitions, but I think that's really important to think it's a dialogue where we're trying to get to an agreement, because there are agents, and you'll encounter them, who think negotiation is a battle, and they think that the person who wins the negotiation is the person who's the most forceful and the person who beats the other person up the most. That's a very not subtle and very ham-handed way of representing your clients. And I think it doesn't serve anybody. It can make the transaction very tense. So instead of, if you've got somebody who's being difficult in the past, one of the strategies that I've used is to say, you know, I really want this to work out for our buyer and seller, because, you know, that's our jobs, right? That's what we do. We're supposed to make it happen for them. And I need to know what we can do, or how we can proceed that will make things, you know, good for your sellers and good for my buyers. Sometimes just having that conversation of what needs to happen shifts them from their stance of, well, we want this, and this, or we're going to not take this, and this, or my sellers are not even going to counter, that kind of attitude, where the agent gets, it's almost like protective. And I'm very protective of my clients, but I also know that facilitating what they want requires me to stay neutral, right? So, and the other thing is, you can make somebody think that saying yes was their idea. So for instance, nobody likes to be coerced into doing something. So for instance, if the buyer's asking for you to pick up closing costs, you can say no to that. You can, so if you're asking that, for instance, you're saying, hey, would your seller be willing to pay closing costs? Well, the way that you can couch that is, you know, you're free to say no, of course, but would you be willing to consider it? That way they feel like they have a choice, and it's not, you need to pay because you need to pay closing costs, because this is the way contracts can read a lot like texts read. And sometimes the tone in texts is not anything like what the person intended. Have you experienced that? Where it comes across as very short and abrupt, and really what they were doing is just, you know, getting to the point, and they didn't mean to be that way at all. Have you all experienced that?
I think so.
Yeah, and in a contract, you know, sometimes if you say to your seller, well, they've asked for $5,000 in closing costs, then the seller can get an attitude and say, you know, because they don't know the why or the how. They don't know that maybe this is their first home and they can't do anything without the closing costs. All they know is that they're being asked to give up money. And without understanding, it seems very, very abrupt, especially in this market. So I would just say, couch your words, be diplomatic in the way you state things and strategic in the way you say things. And I love that. You're free to say no, of course, but would you be willing to consider it? You know, that's you know, or you probably won't. This is the other thing. You probably won't accept this, but do you mind taking it to them just to see what happens? You always want to set reasonable expectations. That's really important, especially in our market. That, you know, I think it's just very important to say there's a chance that we could be in a multiple offer situation. You all know what to do with this. I don't need to go into that. But I think sorry, I'm up late. We had a dog last night who had a stroke, and so it's been a very stressful night. I'm a little scattered. I apologize. Always use market value instead of asking price as your starting point. The strategy is to calculate the value of the property, and the asking price might be too high. The asking price might be too low. They might be having a strategy where they've priced it low in order to get multiple bids. But when you're doing your comps for your buyers or your sellers, always start with market value, right? Let's see. And okay, here's this is important. This is learn the rudiments of persuasion. And there's a few of them. There's reciprocity. People feel obliged to give if they've been given something. Scarcity. Antiques, artworks, and trophy properties are examples of scarcity, persuading people to act. Authority, we're more likely to comply with the request if it comes from a perceived authority or an expert in the field. So for instance, if your lender says you can only do 2.5% closing costs because it's an investment property, that's going to be a lot more acceptable to your buyer than if you say it, right? It's kind of like the spouse can't teach the spouse to drive. Consistency, people gravitate toward it and feel more comfortable in situations that are consistent over time. That's why treating the listing broker as an enemy always backfires. We always need to treat the listing broker with respect because we're going to be in that position as well. And it's not their fault that they're getting overwhelmed with offers and trying to do the best for their clients. And sometimes, like Donna, you said, they just either can't or won't get back to us with the information we would like to have to move forward. So we just need to give everybody some grace. Liking. People like to do business with people they like. So if you're friendly and fun, and every time you call and say, hey, how are you? Instead of, I've got a problem. It's a lot nicer to do real estate with somebody who's pleasant, that you know every time you pick up the phone, you don't get a tense tension in your stomach. Let's see what else. I think it's important to have your data. You need to know, we need to be the economists. We get a lot of that in our world with
hey, can I jump in real quick on something?
Yeah, please, Ryan.
When you were just talking about that, and your last topic, and I happened to have found the other day, I was cleaning out some boxes in the basement, but I found these notes from a class that was similar that I took years ago, but it was on the, it was notes on the 6 moments of power that you have in a negotiation. Okay. And a lot of it is what you just said, but it was just funny that I pulled it out. I was like, oh gosh, this is good stuff. Because one of them was after a genuine thank you, which is considered reciprocity, right after someone says no, provided you follow up with a concession, which is also reciprocity. After you give someone a new or exclusive piece of info, which is scarcity, because they'll pay more attention. After you admit to a small drawback or weakness, which is credibility. And after you give someone a genuine compliment, which is likeness. And then after someone says yes to something publicly agreed upon, which is commitment. But those are your moments of power where you have a power moment where you can actually, get something you want or something in return.
Great. Would you post those in the PC help?
Yeah, I will, because it was just like, oh yeah, this is, you have to think about it first to notice and recognize those moments of power, set them up for yourself. But it was definitely good information.
So let's go through, I think that's important. Let's go through those one-on-one and let's think of some examples. So say the first one again. Reciprocity is
after a genuine thank you, you have a moment of power.
Okay. So let's talk about what that looks like.
So someone does something for you and you give them a genuine thank you or a thank you note or a gift or, something that's you're very thankful to them. Or they're very, thankful to you, but a genuine thank you, not just, oh yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I think about that in terms of real estate, writing a handwritten note to the listing agent when your offer is accepted. Mm-hmm. Like that. Okay, what's the next? Anybody else have any ideas around that?
I don't know what else I had. And I think this was always a huge one. is right after someone says no, provided you follow up with a concession, but right after someone says no, whether it's a client or an agent or anyone, you have a moment of power.
Think about that, because the person saying no in some cases is like, oh, darn, what could I have done? And so when somebody says no, then you ask them for something else.
Basically, yes. If someone says, hey, do you want to sell your home? No. Well, can we have an appointment to talk about it? Okay. It's like they said no to something bigger. So you ask for something else that's smaller, and they're more likely to say yes than if you just said, hey, can we meet? They may have said no, and then where do you go? So,
Love that. And what's the next one?
After you give someone an exclusive piece of information, which is considered scarcity, because they'll pay more attention.
So let's think about that. Like, I happen to know that the home down the street is going on the market in 2 weeks before anybody else knows for X amount of dollars, and that might affect the sale of your home. I heard they're going to price it at such and such. And then that might be a time to be able to have a conversation about correct pricing, about what to put your home on the market for. Okay, what's the next one? Anybody have any ideas or any comments? Just jump right on in.
It says, after you admit a small drawback or weakness, which is credibility.
Okay, so yes, we know the HVAC is not, it's still running, but it's older. Let's think what our moment of power could be. However, your seller can, this is what I'd probably do in this market. However, I can hook you up with a great 210 warranty that'll replace it if it really can't be repaired. How does that sound? Something like that.
Yeah, or something like if you know the home needs some work or some remodeling or something, but admitting that, yes, it's not perfect, but it has great potential, or, we can do this or that, but just the credibility part of recognizing, I guess, that there's always a weakness.
Just so you know, agents, because real estate is so hyper local, my contractor that works in Gwinnett might not want to work in Buckhead. So if you've got the listing in Buckhead and we both know there's work to be done on the house, and you say, I could provide you with the name of the contractor that I use all the time. He's awesome and he's not that expensive. I would be so grateful for that, because that's the contractor that'll come to that house that maybe knows that house. So that's always something that you can offer. Feel out the agent, because some agents get ego about it, but a lot of times, our contractors just want to work where they want to work, and right now they can. They don't want to go 15 miles outside of where they live. So you can always parlay something like that into a win-win. Okay, what's the next one?
After you give someone a genuine compliment, which is likeness. So if you genuinely compliment someone, and actually they said, even if it's not genuine, people still like you more if you compliment them. And it doesn't even have to be about their home or anything. It just be about their shoes or their hair, but whatever, just after a compliment, you have a moment of power where people are more likely to respond favorably to what you say or do.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's something I've used genuinely, because I was taught to always try and find something good about somebody and to comment on it, because most people go through life not knowing what people think about them, unless, and it's so easy to think the bad things that you've heard, right? But to have somebody say something good. So sometimes if an agent answers the phone, I'll say something like, you have an awesome phone voice. I just automatically feel calm and like this deal's going to go smooth. And I've implanted that suggestion, and guess what they want to live up to? That that deal's going to go smooth, and they have this calm voice the whole time. So I've set the stage for that, and it's a genuine compliment, because I wouldn't say it if they were raspy or like that. But if there's anything at all that I can notice about an agent, I want them on my side. I want us to feel like working together. It's like two lawyers who go in to do battle, but they come out and they have dinner together. I want it to be kind of like that. So yeah, I love that. Give a compliment.
Yeah. Just even if like, oh, you've been so helpful, thank you. Then they feel like they need to continue to be helpful, or whatever. Like, that. And then the last one was just after someone says yes to something publicly agreed upon, which is commitment. So they've made a statement, maybe it's something in the disclosure or in the like the listing or, you know, something that's out there. But you use that as like but you said this, it's listed right here, or, you know, something basically it's not just information you got, but information that's publicly available because it's a commitment basically.
I think that publicly available part is important. And I want to share with you something I've learned from experience over the years. And that's that agents are really nice about, you know, oh, don't worry about it. I'm going to get that. If the deal's all done, but the sellers won't fix the one window that's leaking. And the agent says, you know what? I'll take care of it. My brother's a contractor and he works in windows. I'll take care of that. Get it in writing. Because once the closing happens, you get the, oh, I don't remember saying that. Or, oh, no, that's just, you know, I found out that's going to be like $3,000. I can't do that. So make sure whatever is promised is in writing. No matter how nice the agent is, no matter how close you feel to them or how friendly you are to them, get whatever is agreed upon in writing, because that's your job, is to protect your party. Okay, so
yeah, so I'll post that, but I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to jump off. I have a 9:30 appointment that I'm gonna have to run to, but I'll listen to the rest of this because this is good. I like this. All right.
Always negotiate by phone before committing anything to paper. So I think it's important to work things out on the phone. For instance, before you submit an offer that says, we want the septic tank cleaned out and we want we want the HVAC service, call and find out, because they may have just had the septic tank cleaned out and they may have had the HVAC just serviced. So it's just important to ask questions and negotiate, and say, well, do you think your sellers would be, do you think your buyer would be willing to give up this? Or, what do you think? Let's put this deal together so that we only have to write it once. And I think that saves a lot of confusion. You don't get places where people dig in their heels because you didn't ask. For instance, if somebody says, if you hadn't called the agent and you just put in an offer for $5,000 over, and then you find out there's some things that need to be done to the house, or that they're going to leave a whole bunch of junk and lower the price for whatever reason, and they've dug their heels in about that price, it's really hard to come off of that. So do your preparation in advance and try and do all your phone before you write it down. Any comments?
I do. Hey, Candace, I had a question about that comment there. Is it okay to ask for just the bigger stuff, like you were mentioning, the HVAC and the septic tank, or should you just ask for everything that you think you might want, mostly big stuff first, having a conversation with the agent prior to writing the offer?
So I can't imagine a seller ever wanting to replace an HVAC that's working, no matter how old it is. If it's not a repair item, or it's not just not working at all, that's never going to be a negotiation. The best thing. Go ahead.
Oh, I guess that was just an example of the first thing that comes to my head. I totally agree with you. They're not going to say that in advance, but I've had instances where agents will come back and ask me, like for instance, negotiation on the price. Before writing up the offer, they ask questions similar to, well, do you think your owner would, let's say, accept something like $3,000 or $4,000 less than what they're offering? The agent kind of gives you an idea of what they're thinking of, and they're kind of feeling you out. Is that something that you would suggest prior to? I mean, I know that you were mentioning. Okay.
Yep. I went into a new construction, a Lennar property. Now this was in 2019, and I went into they were selling like hotcakes, and I thought, builders weren't negotiating them. But I went into the agent. I said, "Are you seeing your builder accept any offers that are other than ask price?" And she goes, "Yes." I said, would you think that it would be appropriate to offer $5,000 less? And she goes, "Yes." And I said, 10,000? And she goes, no. And I said, how about 9,000? And she goes, yes. So that was the lowest that anybody had offered that the builder is accepted. So I got my buyers 9,000 off that property. So if I hadn't asked that question and just assumed, and I will still ask that, even if they look at me like I'm the dumbest person in the world, I'll still ask that, because you just don't know. The builder, it might be the end of the month and he needs to roll some inventory. So I always ask, and especially in just regular residential, I always ask, what do you think your sellers, because you need to assess their motivation, and the other agent knows that. And they might say, nope, they won't accept it. My seller is stuck on the ask price, and they're hoping to get 5,000 or 10,000 over ask price. They may not even give you a figure, but yeah, I would always ask. When it comes to big things, like if you've reviewed the seller's property disclosure with your buyer, and you call back the agent and say something like, we thank you for the very thorough, here's that, give a compliment again. Thank you for that very thorough seller's property disclosure. We noticed that the roof is 25 years old. My question is, and it looks like there's been one insurance claim. My question is, has your seller had anyone come out to look at the roof? Because sometimes if they've weathered a storm, and like we know in Georgia, we weather storms, if they lived in the when the roofs are very, very old. But sometimes you can go in and say something like that and say, would they mind just trying to find out if that's a potential? Because obviously $10,000 or $30,000 to replace a roof is pretty prohibitive for my buyers, but maybe 2,500 could be worked out, something like that. Any questions so far? Okay, keep your cards close, but try to stay nonchalant. So this is more of a buyer's market thing, but you definitely want to. That's why agents are so vague, right? When you call and say, would your seller accept this? And you're like, well, maybe, but more than likely what they're looking for is a little bit more than ask price. They won't give you those facts. They're playing it close, but they're trying to negotiate for their sellers. So just, and if you say, well, my buyers just love the house, you can say my buyers, the house is a good fit for my buyers. And unless the agent tells you that the sellers are pretty emotional about it. Maybe if you went in, you saw baby pictures there, and they've created some memories in that house, and you can stress those points. Like, my buyers just absolutely can't wait to start a family in this home, and they saw the memories your clients have built, and they can't wait to do that for themselves. But other than that, you don't want to say, oh yeah, he's paying off a credit thing, or we just need to keep our clients' information close to our chests. Live conversation beats texts and emails every day of the week. And texts beat emails every day of the week. And texts beat, I wish they would change that name. Texts beat voicemails every day of the week. There's a lot of times when you can get an agent to text back and you can't get them to email or phone back. But I like to call, I like to text and say, hey, when can we chat? And then if the agent says, oh, today at 3, then I'll call at 3, right? And then we have a chat about what's going on. I can set the stage for, hey, we got our inspection. There's a few things on there, nothing too scary, but we do want to ask for a few things. How do you think your sellers will respond to that? Would they rather that we ask for the amount in closing costs and the buyers will take care of it? Or would your sellers rather to take care of it themselves in case they have somebody who's a contractor in the family? Those kinds of things. All right. Basically, just be very strategic. Like I said, the biggest point I want to make about negotiation is it's not a battle, and it's not a win. It's not a win-lose. It's a win-win. It's coming to an agreement. Two parties coming to an agreement through a series of sometimes concessions. So any thoughts, any comments about that before we go into our one thing?
I'd just like to comment, Candace, that I do what you suggested by speaking to the listing agent upfront on behalf of my buyers to find out what's important to the seller. And then I also emphasize in my offer summary letter that I submit, you know, at the front of my offer, that I'm a very cooperative agent and that my goal is that it's a win-win situation for everyone and that we get to the close of the buyers and the sellers get to the closing table, you know, as quickly and, you know, as quickly as possible without any hassle. So I emphasize that in my summary, my offer summary letter too, in addition to kind of being very friendly and, you know, just very cooperative in my conversation with the listing agent before I even submit our offer.
And that's how a professional real estate agent does it. That exemplifies it, Donna. I mean, just like, couldn't say it any better. You got it. So I just want to, and I hope everybody heard that summary page, because that's important. When you're trying to put multiple deals and you're trying to evaluate them, oh boy, it's really important to know the terms and the steps and have somebody do that right up front so you don't miss anything. Is just so appreciated. So here's my last parting thing is John F. Kennedy famously said, never negotiate out of fear, but never be afraid to negotiate. So, okay, one things. You're gonna have a secret. Okay, Lorinda, what's your one thing?
One thing is to continue with my phone calls. And just to piggyback on what you said about the likeness, I noticed that yesterday when I was calling around to find a home inspector in Columbus, that a few of the ones I left voice messages with, it was like very upbeat. I acknowledge, hey, I know it's the holiday season. You're probably swamped with getting back on track from Christmas, but just wanted to know if you had anything available for this week, you know, the next couple of days. And so when they called back, they spoke as if they were old friends. And I think that message was what prompted the reciprocation of the upbeatness of the call. So I just wanted to point out that it did work, the likeness part. So my one thing is to continue with my calls and adding 5 people to the database.
Excellent. Love that. Tracy?
I'm also going to do care calls.
I love that. And Donna?
For me, I want to watch Jean Rivers' Business Planning Clinic and just review my numbers to make sure I have all of that set for the beginning of the year. Because I really don't have a good idea of my numbers and I want to make sure that I do.
So, you know, I've been really mulling over, you know, what they say, one of the things they say is you've got to be really clear about your vision. And I feel like I've been sort of clear, but not crystal clear. So the numbers really help with that. And that's just getting really crystal clear about your vision. So that's great. You guys are just amazing. My one thing is coaching today. I've got, I think, maybe 9 people still committed to coaching today. They're not still with family. So that's my one thing. I want to thank you all for being here. I know it's still kind of the holiday, but I really appreciate you being here. And tomorrow we're going to talk about working on our mission statement for 2022, because every business needs to have a mission statement. We need to know what we're about and why we're doing it. And even if they're similar or the same, that doesn't matter, just so long as we have one.
Thank you, Candace. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.